that it's going to be changed irreversibly and forever for a large number of period of time in the future. So in this context, I thought cybersecurity assumes far more significance. But as an industrialist, you would often believe that you really don't need to know about cybersecurity. You are an industrialist. You run industries. Therefore, you are engaged in other aspects of business, and that cybersecurity has not got to be a cup of tea for you. A lot of people still believe that cybersecurity is a responsibility of the government of India, and that we as industrialists, we as stakeholders in the industrial ecosystem have got no connection with cybersecurity. But as we dive a bit deep, we very quickly begin to start realizing that our perceptions were not very adequate and that we now need to change our perspectives. See, there's an old Indian saying which says, when the storm comes in full gear, just lie low next to the ground. Let the storm pass by. And once the storm passes by, you can stand up and walk again. I think a similar approach has to be adopted by industrialists and other stakeholders during COVID-19. A lot of developments are taking place, and I thought I will share some of these important developments with you that are happening internationally as also nationally, and then try to see how, as industrialists, as the Federation of Industries in Gujarat, you are going to effectively address these important issues. I have a small presentation. I thought I will share that with you. So when we talk about cybersecurity perspectives for industries in COVID-19, we have to be prepared for a new world space that's taking place. Actually, the world is moving very, very fast. And the quicker you start realizing, the better it's going to be. Recently, the government of India has banned 47 clones of Chinese apps. Now, this is a sequence of events happening over at least about 5 weeks. First, the Indian government bans 59 Chinese apps. Then, the Indian Army and the armed forces ban 89 apps with effect from 15th of July 2020. And now, in the last week of July 2020, we find that the government of India has banned about 47 clones or unauthorized versions of Chinese apps which were banned earlier. The government has also come up with a very serious warning that in case if you are found to be in violation of the Information Technology Act, then strict action is going to be taken. Actually, it is the tensions between India and China and the border that's really become a catalyst point for India first to ban these 59 Chinese apps, including TikTok and a large number of others. And by doing so, India gave a very sound message to the world community and to China that it will do everything in its power and possession to protect its sovereignty, security, and integrity. On top of it, we begin to start realizing there are hacks all over. Twitter recently got hacked with a massive hack. This was a typical spear phishing attack where the Twitter accounts of large number of very potential and powerful personalities across the world having verified Twitter handles. Those accounts were hacked, and simultaneously on those accounts, messages were put up which were in the form of a Bitcoin scam, where the personality said that, look, I want to give back to the community. I will, if you have $1,000 in Bitcoin, please send it back to me. And within 30 minutes, I will return back with Bitcoins worth $2,000. So if you were to make 100% profit in 30 minutes, Who's not going to fall for it? A lot of people fell for it. Till now, Twitter is still investigating the entire ecosystem. It's attacks happening not just in Twitter, but also on networks within India. For example, there was a big cyber attack on the National Highway Authority of India email server. Of course, no data was lost, but see the ramifications of what this could potentially have an impact. And if you are running an enterprise or an industry, I think India Bull's case needs to be a wake-up example. During COVID-19, during national lockdowns, India Bulls got targeted by a massive maize ransomware attack. As per one report, the company lost more than about 550 crore rupees. And of course, the losses are still being counted. In fact, ransomware has become so predominant that as an industry's stakeholder, as an industrialist, you need to give topmost priority to ransomware. Why? Because as per one survey, every 14 seconds, one company anywhere in the world becomes a victim of ransomware. Imagine if your establishment becomes a victim of ransomware, where you find that all your data is locked up by some algorithm, and for purposes of unlocking, they are asking a huge volume of money as digital ransom, and you also have no guarantees that even if you pay the said ransom, whether you will get access back to your particular data or not. So let's look at the learnings from the Honda cyber attack. In Honda, we found that recently the entire manufacturing units in different parts of the world were impacted by a massive cyber attack. So much so that manufacturing had to be substantially reduced or lessened to a large extent. Further, when I look at countries, I find countries are under attack. Australia has seen some big cyber attacks on its critical information infrastructure. As per Australian experts, it's a violation of Australian sovereignty. But I think what we see in Australia is only the tip of the iceberg. A lot of countries are today facing immense challenges in the context of these cyber attacks. So you quickly start realizing that in India, the Indian Nodal Agency on Cyber Security, Computer Emergency Response Team of India, has already warned of a big cyber attack on India using phishing. Further, another agency in Singapore has warned of this big cyber attack. And lately, the Reserve Bank of India has warned of this big cyber attack on the banking sectors, and thereby has asked all banking stakeholders to strengthen their cyber security. Why is this happening? Because during COVID-19, some fundamental shifts have taken place. At the time when people were in lockdowns, when people are in a state of fear or panic, you quickly start realizing that this is the golden time for cyber criminals. They are weaponizing fear and panic, and lo and behold, they are engaging in all kinds of cyber criminal activities. EasyJet suddenly found that its systems had been hacked and 9 million customers' data had been stolen. Coming back to India, we have another case of Cognizant, which is an IT security services giant. They also got hit with a massive ransomware attack. And this attack has been very, very severe. And of course, the firefighting still continues to go on. But we are not alone. Almost everybody in the world is on target. Every industry is on target. In the UK, the focus has been on the electricity grid and the electricity system, where a massive cyber attack has been launched. Further, if you think that lawyers and law firms are going to be safe, think again. One of the biggest law firms in the United States of America, which has so many top-notch celebrity clients, found that it itself had been hacked and the data of celebrity clients stolen and then sold for consideration on the dark net. Everywhere, the critical information infrastructure is being targeted. In Prague, the Prague airport was being targeted by a massive cyber attack, but fortunately, they were able to go ahead and thwart this. But apart from airports, it's the medical age superstars that are being targeted. So in these COVID-19 times, the COVID-19 testing laboratories, hospitals have become the number one target for cyber criminals. And cyber attacks are increasingly being launched on hospitals. It all begins on the second week of March 2020, when in the Czech Republic, at the city of Brno, there is Brno University Hospital. This is no normal hospital. This is COVID-19's one of the topmost and biggest testing laboratories pertaining to coronavirus in Czech Republic. The cyber attack was so severe on this hospital that the entire IT network had to be shut down. And consequently, surgeries had to be postponed. It had a huge impact. And ever since, we have been seeing massive attack on all kinds of hospitals and testing laboratories across the world. Already the US and Canada is complaining that a lot of their COVID-19 vaccine testing laboratories and labs are being constantly hounded by cyber attacks because cyber criminals increasingly want to have access to the growing new information about new research pertaining to new vaccine to fight COVID-19. No one is secure. Even in the US, the Department of Health and Human Services has also been targeted by a massive cyber attack. In India, because there is so much of increase in cybersecurity breaches and cybercrimes, already there's a big warning that's come from the National Cybersecurity Coordinator that online users need to be very careful when they are engaging in any activities in this online space. Well, a lot of times people are using VPNs or virtual private networks, but quickly realize that even when you use VPNs, you still have to be careful that you choose the right VPN so that the cybersecurity is not adequately breached. It's indeed strange. COVID-19 and national lockdowns led to a complete closure of all economic activity, all industrial activity. Offices were forced almost instantaneously and overnight to transform using video conferencing and work from home. But the last few months' experience of working from home has clearly said that there are a large number of legal, policy, and regulatory issues pertaining to video conferencing that have not yet been appropriately addressed. And it's time that the law needs to be appropriately amended in this regard. Further, when you're running your economic activity, how can you run it in such an ecosystem where there is so much of fake news all around? In fact, the World Health Organization has described COVID-19 not just as a pandemic, but also as an infodemic. And in this infodemic, there is massive increase of fake news of various stakeholders at local, regional, national, and international levels. With fake news all around us, and with us increasingly relying upon what we see on social media to be correct, we have to very quickly start realizing that we are ourselves becoming pawns in the hands of these fake news cyber criminals. But I think with now COVID-19, lockdowns, companies have actually woken up to new ground realities in terms of work from home. In fact, work from home itself has thrown up new cybersecurity challenges. Because when you are in the office or at work, at least the company takes care of the cybersecurity of your networks, of your devices, of your data. But when you are at home, you are using your personal devices. And invariably, you are not being very careful about how these devices are being secured or are being made reasonably safe from cybersecurity breaches. Consequently, we have begun to start seeing massive cybersecurity attacks targeted at work from home devices. And even now, while the lockdowns is being lifted up and different industries have already resumed and offices have resumed, there's still now a big chunk of the people who are working using a work from home paradigm. And of course, they have become the new favorite target of cyber criminals. No wonder there is no denying the fact that in today's world, cybersecurity has to be the need of the hour. Everybody has to concentrate and focus attention on cybersecurity. The reason for this is very simple. Just as internet is a network of networks, it's all the computers in the world joined together on a network. So it's all a big chain. So cybersecurity has a huge chain. And we are all distinctive links in the said chain. The chain is as strong as the weakest link. Therefore, we have to make sure that we as stakeholders do not become the weakest link of the cybersecurity chain per se. No wonder, no longer is it now required that you only provide lip service to cybersecurity. You have to now cogently start taking proactive steps so as to specifically protect and preserve the cybersecurity of your networks, of your systems, and of your data. Imagine you're running a business, an industry, and somebody breaches your cybersecurity, copies all your data, and goes away. You are rendered completely ineffective. You're stunned by what's happened because that data, which is so confidential, is going to be used for being sold to competition or for being sold on the online space, on the dark net for monetary consideration. No wonder when cybersecurity has become so important, it's important to understand that at an international level, there is a vacuum. There is no international cybersecurity law in place. So consequently, countries have said, we are not going to keep on waiting for this international cybersecurity law to come up. In fact, way back in 2015, at the WSIS Forum in Geneva, I had proposed the idea of an international convention on cyber law and cybersecurity. And very quickly, I realized that the idea was much early of its times. Why? Because states were no longer very willing to go into and get bound into an international convention on cyber law and cybersecurity. So consequently, I found that different countries have begun to start taking distinctive national approaches on cybersecurity. And they have come up with their own distinctive national laws on cybersecurity. China is a glaring example in this regard. Last few years, distinctive national laws on cybersecurity, so much so that even in lockdown period during COVID-19, it has actually come up with new rules under its cybersecurity law. Vietnam has come up with a very strong cybersecurity law, wherein the concept of a national cyberspace has been granted legal sanction, which means that the entire internet is the national cyberspace according to Vietnamese cybersecurity law, and that Vietnamese cybersecurity law would be applicable to the entire internet. In Australia, one finds the approach is different. Australia has focused more on anti-encryption perspectives. It's come up with an anti-encryption law, which says whether you are a company in Australia or not, if your services are made available in Australia and you use encryption, then you have to give the back-end keys to the government. Otherwise, the same becomes an offense, punishable with 5 years imprisonment and fine. So while all this is happening, in America, a very distinctive new approach has come in, which is in the state of Ohio, where the law has said that, look, I'm providing to all the stakeholders, whether it's corporates or industries, a cybersecurity safe harbor. Which means that the law is asking you to do 10 or 20 distinctive things. If you do these 10 or 20 distinctive things, then the law presumes that you are cyber secure. And thereafter, the law protects you in the sense that even after doing these things, you still get hacked or your cybersecurity gets breached. You will not be made liable for such cybersecurity breach of any kind whatsoever. On top of it, this year, we have seen some very earth-shaking developments as far as cyber law and cybersecurity are concerned. From 1st of January 2020, California has introduced its new IoT or Internet of Things law, a legislation which has mandated that every manufacturer of an IoT device in California has to have reasonable security features embedded in its IoT device at the time of manufacturing. So when all these things are happening, despite all this, one finds that cybersecurity breaches are constantly on the rise. And when they are rising, they're only telling us that these cybersecurity breaches are no longer going to go away. They're going to get worse with each passing time. I've recently written a book. It's called New Cyber World Order Post COVID-19. This book which is up on the internet and Amazon, has talked of some new parameters that I have seen on the horizon. Look, while we have been all very busy trying to track the growth of infections of COVID-19, and we have been concerned about a lot of other activities, slowly some key irreversible changes are happening in cyberspace. And by the time we come to the close of the fight against COVID-19, we will then enter into a new cyberspace, which will have a new cyber world order, which means that cyberspace will be completely different from the cyberspace that we know today. There will be more cyber crimes. Cybersecurity breaches will be paramount and very frequent. Countries will become very, very powerful. And there could be even an impact upon enjoyment of civil liberties and digital freedoms per se. So when you're talking of a new world order in cyberspace, and when things are changing so rapidly, I think as all stakeholders, whether you're corporates, whether you're industry or government, you have to quickly start taking cognizance of these important changes. And an example in this regard is seeing a list of countries who during COVID-19 times have come up with dedicated cyber legal frameworks, rules, regulations that are ultimately strengthening the hands of the governments in the fight against COVID-19. Nothing wrong in that, except that these are all leading to a very, very strong state power that's emerging as a global paradigm, where focus is increasingly becoming on cyber resilience. With increasing cybersecurity breaches across the world and in every region, cybersecurity is no longer just on the fringes. It's now a central lifeline issue. On top of it, cyber crimes have massively increased. You know that as per one survey, there is a 500% increase in cyber incidents from the time COVID-19 has come up. And these cyber incidents not only include cyber crimes, but also cyber security breaches. In India, we've seen some massive increase of cybercrime. Identity theft and fraud are number 2, 3 most important crimes. But the topmost crime today in COVID-19 is something that we call as phishing. Anything which is aimed to somehow win over your trust and then ask you to click on some links or open some attachments, and lo and behold, your entire data goes off. So when you are in the industrial ecosystem space, you would increasingly want to rely upon machine learning, on artificial intelligence. And therefore, you need to be mindful that there are a lot of new developments pertaining to artificial intelligence that are taking place. The law pertaining to artificial intelligence is beginning to develop. Internet of Things is also seeing some massive growth. Globally, we haven't seen one common unique parameter on cybersecurity for IoT. That's why when you use a smart TV, smart refrigerator, smart ovens, be careful because they can be used for constantly surveilling upon you. That's why the United Kingdom in February 2020 has come up with the new guidelines and rules for regulating cybersecurity on Internet of Things. Well, if you're in the industrial sector, you would have heard of blockchains. Blockchain is a technology through which a lot of applications are made primarily, and the most significant being Bitcoins. But blockchain is now increasingly being used across the world for a variety of electronic governance applications. It's very likely that you would also be using this entire blockchain technology in the coming times. But of course, the legalities for blockchain are also getting developed as we go forward. If you thought facial recognition was only for governments, then really think again. Facial recognition is now being used by corporates, by industries, to recognize people as and when they enter the particular premises or to gain secured access to data. but facial recognition is throwing up large number of legal and policy issues which would require appropriate addressing by the legal frameworks in India. Now, you may say that I'm only interested in the internet. I'm not necessarily focused on anything else, but very quickly you have to start learning to recognize the existence of a new phenomenon, and that's called the darknet, which is that dark underbelly of the internet where you cannot go using a search engine. You have to go using a particular browser known as the onion router browser. And of course, cybercrime is the economic model on these kinds of darknets. So you have to be mindful lest tomorrow your corporate or industrial data gets available for sale on the darknet by unknown people. Coming back to India, I believe that India has had an early advantage. Way back in 2008, India amended its Information Technology Act and incorporated the definition of cybersecurity in a legal manner under Section 2 of the IT Act. Further, in 2013, India came up with its national cybersecurity policy. It was a good policy, but over the years, we have not been able to implement the same, and it continues to be a mere paper tiger. In this context, there's no denying the fact that India requires a dedicated new legislation on cybersecurity, which we don't have. We just have one cyber law, which is the Information Technology Act 2000. Therefore, there's an absolute urgent need for having dedicated legal frameworks on cybersecurity in India. And from the industry's perspective, you need to take a keen watch at what's happening on the horizon. So if you're running an industry, your question would be, how am I concerned with cyber law? Well, friends, I think you're all concerned with cyber law because cyber law is that discipline of law which is impacting all of us. So if you're using any of the 7 raw materials today, that's if you use computers, computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, communication devices, as also data and information in the electronic form, you get covered under the Information Technology Act 2000. And I think this is covered under this particular legislation. You have to be increasingly aware of how this legislation is applicable to you as such. This is primarily an e-commerce enabling legislation, but in fact, it governs all your digital activities. It is India's only cyber law, only law that deals with the electronic format. And it's a special law. The provisions of the same prevail over anything inconsistent therewith contained in any other law for the time being in force. Various cybercrimes are already detailed under the IT law. You may, at corporate level, at industrial level, find that your data is being stolen. Some people are just walking away with your data. You find yourself helpless. You don't need to be helpless because the Indian cyber law provides various legal remedies to you, both in the form of damages by way of compensation, as also criminal liability of imprisonment and fine. At this juncture, I want to basically highlight another important legal concept, which is that of an intermediary. Now, this is a new concept that's been brought within the ambit of the Indian IT law. And it's so wide that almost any corporate, any industry in India would qualify as an intermediary. The moment you are providing any service with respect to third-party data, or you're handling or processing third-party data, you become a network service provider and hence an intermediary. Once you're an intermediary, you are mandated to exercise due diligence while you discharge your obligations. And of course, this due diligence means compliance with the IT law, compliance with various parameters under the IT Act. Of course, the entire issue of intermediaries has been effectively dealt with under Section 79 of the IT Act, which primarily says that if you're an intermediary and if you exercise due diligence, you will be entitled to exemption from legal liability, and therefore you cannot be held liable for legal consequences. But the problem is most of the companies in India, most of the industries in India comply with the Indian cyber law in breach rather than in compliance. The Supreme Court, in the historic judgment of Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, has categorically upheld the constitutional validity of the Indian Information Technology Act 2000 and specifically the provisions pertaining to intermediary liability. What happens if you do not comply with Indian cyber law? Now, a lot of people in India love to subscribe to the Indian Jugaad School of Management. We love to do Jugaad because we believe we can manage almost any situation in life. But my limited experience in the electronic ecosystem of 25 years tells me that it's very, very difficult for you to do Jugaad in the digital ecosystem. Because for doing Jugaad, you will be making some false electronic records. The moment you make false electronic records, it is electronic forgery under Section 465 of the Indian Penal Code. The moment you commit electronic forgery or you forge electronic records for purposes of cheating, it's a very serious offense, punishable with 7 years imprisonment and fine under Section 468 of the Indian Penal Code. If you create false electronic records for harming reputation of another person, that another becomes a serious offense with 3 years imprisonment and fine under Section 469 of the Indian Penal Code. Of course, what happens if you don't comply with the IT Act? I think you have to quickly be prepared for two kinds of consequences. First, you can be sued for damages by way of compensation up to 50 million rupees or 5 crore rupees per contravention. So, if there are 5 contraventions, you could be sued up to 25 crore rupees. 5 crores into 5. In addition, there could also be exposure to legal liability. You could effectively be sent to jail for various cyber crimes under the IT Act, and these could be made punishable from 3 years imprisonment to life imprisonment, and fine ranging from 1 lakh rupees to 10 lakh rupees. The government of India has come up with various parameters for cyber legal frameworks, various rules which we call as the Information Technology Rules 2011. A number of these rules have various factors and parameters specifically focused on cybersecurity and its protection and preservation. Further, if you are an industry or if you are a corporate body, then there's an obligation upon you in your capacity as an intermediary to report any cybersecurity breach that comes to your system. And in case you don't report it, it actually becomes an offense. So, by virtue of notification of 4th of January 2017, the Indian Computer Emergency Response Team, being the Indian nodal agency on cybersecurity, has specifically mandated all body corporates to report any cybersecurity breaches. You don't report, it's an offense with 1 year's imprisonment and fine. So the choice you have to make is, do you want to expose yourself? It's always a great idea to report about your cybersecurity breach. Gone are the days where you could say that, look, if I'm going to report about my cybersecurity breach, I might be seen as being unsecured. No, today nobody is secure. So you don't need to really worry. Just go ahead and report. Once you report, you come within the status of being a victim party. And if you're a victim party, then you yourself cannot be forced to either shell out money to others or to compensate others in another manner. Meanwhile, we are beginning to start seeing that the numbers of internet users globally and specifically in India have been massively growing. In the lockdowns, internet was the only sole means of communication, so a lot of Indians joined on to the internet bandwagon. And of course, I think this entire lockdown period and the unlocking down process has brought forward some key parameters for industries to learn. These are some key corporate learnings that as industries you must have in mind as you go forward. Let's look at some of these more significant learnings. First and foremost, I think industries, corporates have learned that it's humans first, economy later. And of course, companies have now been testing with various models on how to make work from home far more better and efficient during these COVID-19 times. Further, with factories being closed and now slowly opening up, companies have learned a lesson to focus on advancement planning in enhancing the depth and ambit of their inventories. Further, the companies have also learned that corporate networks are constantly being targeted by cyber criminals and cybersecurity breaches. Companies have also learned that in these transient times, cybercrime is going to be a constant companion because it's constantly increasing in its scope, ambit, and impact. So you have, as a company, as an industry, come to brace up with new ground realities that phishing, identity theft are big ticket items so far as cybercrime and its consistent growth in India is concerned. So consequently, industries and companies are increasingly focusing on cybersecurity of their networks and corporate data. And I think this is one area which is going to require a lot of your effort, your money, your energy, and your time. As per one estimate, a number of these major companies in India have already started allocating 35 to 40% of their overall budgets to cybersecurity. Because in these changed ground realities, if you are not going to focus on protection and preservation of your cybersecurity, you are going to be under immense challenge and trouble. So in some cases, companies are even putting aside 50% of their total monies on cybersecurity, given the massive increase of cybersecurity breaches. Companies have started engaging in scenario and planning in terms of strategizing the amount, raw material, the managing costs, upskilling the workforce, and get workers who have migrated out of the cities back to work. So there's increasing focus on increasing information and on implementation amongst the corporate sector in the context of new developments that are taking place in the corporate world, new rules and regulations, guidelines that the government and various of governmental agencies and authorities are constantly updating and implementing. Further, I believe a lot of companies and industries have begun to start incorporating the legal strategies into their business models. If you are running an industry and you think life will be the same as the pre-COVID-19 times, you really need to think again, because you now need to incorporate legal strategies as part of your business strategy, because business has changed and you are most likely going to be sued, or you will be suing someone either during COVID-19 or at the end of COVID-19. Already by the we are beginning to expect a massive surge, a big wave of litigation increase in India. So be prepared that you can either sue or you can be sued either during COVID-19 or post-COVID-19. So it's better to start incorporating your legal strategies of what should be your response mechanisms in the event you are being sued. Because these COVID-19 times, you have not been able to function normally. You have not been able to fulfill your responsibilities, your industrial obligations, nor completely perform your contracts to the best extent possible. So the legal exposure is constantly on. You have to be mindful of that the same as you go forward. And I think most of the companies and industries today are focusing on conserving cash, given these unprecedented times, and given the chances of new potential lockdowns in the second wave of the pandemic. Already, different states are coming up with local lockdowns. These are also further beginning to have impact upon economic and industrial activity. Further, the virtual learning, the online learning has become the de facto mode of educating, updating, and constantly renewing your skill sets. So companies have increasingly started digital virtual learning programs and platforms, and as also alternate and appropriate digital learning strategies, so that the managers and employees can develop their skill sets during this COVID-19 time, including the issues of social distancing. Further, a lot of industries and companies in India have actually set up COVID-19 learning response teams. These are consisting of members of different stakeholders to collate learnings for the companies during COVID-19, so that there's no point of reinventing the wheel. Understand what others have done or are doing, and then let's try to adopt the same to the extent it's applicable to us. Further, I began to start seeing that industries and companies in India have begun to start coming up with rolling 6-week calendars in terms of the plan of action, an exposure heat map of the current employees of the companies or industries impacted by COVID-19, and also implementing dashboards showing progress, key indicators, and decision figures. And one big problem is that while you are opening up your industries, what happens when somebody comes to work at your industry and contracts COVID-19? Is he or she going to sue you tomorrow? And if so, what's going to be your response? What kind of defense mechanisms are you going to evolve to show that you, as an industry, as a corporate, did everything in your power and possession to prevent the dissemination or the transmission of the COVID-19 infection to people working in your factories, in your offices, while and during COVID-19 times? So in this context, companies, I believe, have become more sensitive. They've started disseminating and communicating COVID-19 precautions to their employees. And it's very logical. The more you enlighten them, the more you empower them, the lesser the chances that they will be negligent, and the lesser the chances that they could potentially contract COVID-19 infections. And that's why companies are saying to their employees, look, even if you don't come to the office, sit at home. Please enhance your skill sets, because I will be requiring those skill sets from you. They are also subsidizing some of these skill set acquisition processes as well. Further, I've seen that companies have started taking organizational decisions about health and legal risk mitigation. Today, a lot of people who can potentially afford not to open their offices or industries are choosing not to open so, because they are afraid if they open the offices of their industries and infection comes big manner, then apart from closing the industry at that point of time, you will have an umpteen number of lawsuits and legal exposures, because the employees are going to blame you, your industry, to say that because they were working with your industry and because you were negligent, they contracted the COVID-19 infection at your workplace, and therefore you have to not just pay them money by way of damages as compensation, but also you have to face criminal charges. So it's a very, very difficult time frames. So therefore, a lot of new decisions have begun to start taking place in companies and in industries about the health and legal risk mitigation. And therefore, there's an increasing thrust amongst industries and companies to start focusing on more communication with their employees and focusing more on hygiene. It's not just the mere sanitizers, the masks, and the gloves that are in question. It's a change of a mindset that is called upon by the advent of the COVID-19 infection per se. Further, as you are in different industries, you would have entered into various contracts. A number of these contracts would have force majeure clauses, which means clauses pertaining to act of God, which means that in case certain specified acts of God take place, then you will not be liable for any legal consequences. These include earthquakes, floods, riots, and a lot of other exceptions. However, is COVID-19 or is coronavirus a face majeure? And if so, can it protect you legally? And that's a multi-million-dollar question over which there are no specific real answers. China has already started declaring COVID-19 as a force majeure. But when one comes to India, one starts seeing that different courts have begun to start taking different approaches on COVID-19. In one of the cases in the Bombay High Court, the Bombay High Court refused to buy the argument that COVID-19 was a force majeure. Well, it'll require some kind of a clarification at the level of the Supreme Court of India. Just like the Supreme Court of India has come up with a suo motu order, which is suspended all limitation. And I think we require some similar clarifications for industries, for corporates. Otherwise, because of lockdowns, because of COVID-19, as industries, you are not able to perform to your optimal level. So obviously, a lot of your contractual obligations, which were supposed to be done by you within time, would not have been done. And if that being so, whether you as an industry, as a corporate, can take the benefit of COVID-19 as a force majeure, that's a very open-ended question. But of course, for purposes of determining whether COVID-19 would be a force majeure or not, you will have to still go to court of law. Or the other contracting party with whom you have contracted would want to go in a court of law suing you for damages. So be prepared for a new surge of wave of legal cases, litigations coming your way, even towards the end of COVID-19 and by the time COVID-19 comes to an end. So the problem is, even at the international level, there's no international legal certainty pertaining to whether the non-adherence to contractual obligations by industries and companies would qualify as force majeure or not. So therefore, in India, a lot of companies and industries have started becoming very clever. During these COVID-19 times, during the lockdown and now the unlocking down processes, more and more industries and companies are engaging into negotiations and discussions with their business partners so as to renegotiate their commercial terms. And they are now focusing on revisiting their contracts to explore the impact of COVID-19 on such existing contractual obligations. Further, companies have been constantly keeping themselves updated about the latest changes. Actually, the government of India and various governmental agencies have been coming up with a flurry of litigation, of notifications, rules, regulations, guidelines, advisories on different aspects of activities during COVID-19. So you have to constantly be alive to what are the new developments in your space so that I believe you are in a better position to go forward in the event these activities start happening. So I believe also now there's a shift in the process of the mindset. Industries have now gone ahead and revisited their obligations to ensure safe and health work environment for their employees once normal operations resume post lockdowns. Of course, even some of the industries have started remodeling their industries, keeping in mind social distancing norms and thereby re-engineering and replanning their industrial operations so as to be in sync and in compliance with various COVID-19 regulations of different governmental agencies. Further, there are also going to be large number of important legal issues in terms of labor aspects, which will impact you in terms of leave entitlement, termination. Also, you have to engage with all the attention of the labor-related issues and the union-related issues and the ramifications that are going to emerge during and at the end of COVID-19. Basically, there's no denying the fact that cybersecurity is essential for you, and you have to increasingly now open your eyes to a new world of more legal exposure, of more litigation, both by you and against you. So you will have to litigate to protect your legal turf, and others will litigate against you to get their monies or to get the fulfillment of their contractual obligations out of you. So, and I think the exposure is going to be based on a lot of things. First and foremost, there's inability of industries to complete corporate obligations under the existing contracts. Then further, you'll realize that your reliance upon force majeure contracts may not be very effective. You further, as a company, as an industry, need to ensure, when you need to look at the Indian Information Technology Act 2000 and rules and regulations, please go and take the benefit of the intermediary liability protections therein so that you can get a Suraksha Kavach, a security layer of protection which the law mandatorily guarantees you in the event to comply with the Indian cyber law. And of course, if you are industries, if you're companies, you're all intermediaries, please take the benefit of the statutory exemption from legal liability under Section 79 of the Information Technology Act 2000 to be on the right side of the law. Well, that's in a nutshell of what's happening. I am the honorary chancellor also of an online university called Cyber Law University. This is an online university where we have been creating courses. These are value addition courses to update your skill sets on cutting edge issues on cyber law, cybercrime, cybersecurity law, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and Internet of Things. In the last 2.5 years, we have got more than 24,000 students from 169 countries speaking 50 national languages who've done these various courses. So we have come up with a number of these courses Most of these contain information which is not available in the syllabi of schools and colleges. So there is a new course that we have put up on coronavirus, work from home and legal issues, as also cyber law, cybercrime, and cybersecurity during coronavirus age. We also have courses pertaining to relationship of cyber law and cybercrime, and also the legal challenges of cybersecurity. Well, this is what other people talk about us. This is what they say, what we as a law firm do. My law firm, Pavan Duggal Associates, works on the intersection of law and technology. And every day, for us, it's a new game plan. Why? Because we keep on learning something new that we have not specifically learned in the previous days of our actions. So it's a new phase for us, and we realize that we have to specifically constantly update our skill sets as we go forward. We help companies to ensure their compliances under the Indian cyber law. We ensure that as intermediaries, you do your documented due diligence. You take care of your protecting your legal interests in the intersection of law and technology. And in the event there's a litigation, we help you represent yourself and protect. All said and done, I'm just going to finally conclude by saying that today, cyber law and cybersecurity represent very important aspects of our day-to-day life. And very quickly, we have to start realizing that these are important, fascinating aspects in our lives. And therefore, as industries, you must be seen to be in compliance with the applicable law. Ignorance of law, ladies and gentlemen, is no excuse in the eyes of law. So let's not err on the side of some adventurism. Let's err on the side of caution. Try to be compliant with the provisions of law, and then try to limit your exposure to legal liability. That was in a nutshell of what I wanted to talk about this afternoon with you. And I would really want to thank the Federation for giving us this opportunity to talk and share my perspectives with you. I will be happy to answer any specific questions or queries that you would have. Over to Mr. Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Duggal. We can have and answers. If anybody would like to ask a question, you can kindly type in your question in the chat box.
The way that there is a question on the chat box which says, how and where to report about cyber wrongs? I think that's a fascinating question. Everybody today wants to know the answer to this question. The reason is very, very simple, because everybody is getting impacted because of these cyber activities. You are either losing money, or you're finding your credit card has been misused, or your internet banking transactions have been wrongly done, or money has been taken out, or you have been defrauded, or your data has been stolen by your employees, or it's being misused by your competition. So a lot of these cyber wrongs are happening. So the first thing that you need to know in today's scenario is that you do not have to be quiet. Whenever a cyber wrong takes place, please go ahead and report this. Now, for reporting, you have a couple of mechanisms. You have to quickly realize various cyber wrongs have been classified as cyber crimes under the Information Technology Act 2000 and also under the Indian Penal Code. So if you realize that a cyber wrong has been committed against you, please go ahead and report this online. There is a Government of India platform known as cybercrime.gov.in. You can go and report your online incidents there. We could also, you could go to your local police station and physically hand over a copy of the complaint. In addition, you could go to your state police website and go and lodge an online complaint there. A number of state police people or agencies have allowed you the facility of trying to go ahead and report an online FIR. Like if you go to the website of Delhi Police, it allows you to register an online FIR. You could also go and register that for the purposes of ensuring that appropriate action is going to take place. And in case if you realize that you know the identity of the person who's done the cyber, you're wrong, and you have evidence to back that up, you can also sue that particular person for damages by way of compensation up to 5 crore rupees under Section 43 of the Indian Information Technology Act 2000. I hope that would answer your question. Okay, I have yet another question. This is from Mr. Bimal Bhatt, who says, if someone hacks our email through outside network by hacking and breach email data and send email to our clients, what is the necessary steps to prevent? Well, this is happening more and more frequently. If this happens to you, the first step that you have to do is to independently try to connect with, first and foremost, first report this to the law enforcement agencies. For that, again, do the online reporting at cybercrime.gov.in. In addition, go and report at your local police station or on email or on the electronic web platform provided by your state police. In addition, please connect with each of your customers, telling them that our systems have been hacked. We are the victim. We have already confirmed and reported this to the law enforcement agencies. Please do not rely upon any such emails. You must try to convince your customers that, look, as a law-abiding company, as an industry, you did everything that was within your power and possession to protect the cyber security of your systems and of your data. But despite that, you still got hacked. So once you're going to be honest with your customers, they are going to believe you. But if you say, no, I had the best cyber security and this could not have happened, then I think you're walking the wrong walk. People have begun to start realizing that there is nothing known as absolute security. What was secure yesterday is not secure today. And what is cyber secure today will definitely not be cyber secure tomorrow. So best is to adopt transparency. In addition, once this incident happens, it's also breach of cyber security. Mandatorily, please report this to the Indian nodal agency on cyber security, being the Indian Computer Emergency Response Team. Because if you don't report it, tomorrow, once it comes to the attention of the authorities, there's always going to be a Damocles sword hanging your head. Why? Because the authorities can at any point of time take action, including criminal action against you for your failure to report such cybersecurity breaches. I think that's what will have to be done. But after these initial emergency steps, I believe you have to constantly keep on going forward and updating the cyber security protocols, processes, and procedures. Already the Indian law mandates you to have and follow the minimum certifications that are prescribed by ISO 27001 as part of reasonable security practices and procedures. I hope that would have answered your question. There's another question from Mr. Rajesh Vaidya, who says, how robust is the online banking/financial system of India to prevent cybercrime compared to other nations like USA, EU, etc.? Well, as a nation, we believe that we've done quite a lot in terms of trying to protect the banks. Way back in 2011, the Reserve Bank of India had appointed the G. Gopala Krishna Working Group, of which I was also a member. And this working group, in its report, laid down the framework for cybersecurity for the banking ecosystem and banks in the country. This report was subsequently notified by the Reserve Bank of India, and pursuant thereto, almost all banks have complied with minimum parameters of cybersecurity. But the problem is that cyber criminals are invariably 10 steps ahead of law enforcement agencies. So they keep on coming up with new mechanisms, new approaches on how to deal with breaching of banking systems. So our systems are secure, but we still have to do quite a lot. So maybe if I compare the Indian systems with the Middle East or even with the European Union or America, I find the Indian Reserve Bank of India has done a remarkable job, but yes, there's a huge gap. There are some banks which are not completely complying with the result that they are contributing to pulling down the cybersecurity standards of the banking sector. I believe much more work needs to be done, but we are pretty much well clued up as compared to whether it's US or EU in terms of having in place the adequate international standards on cybersecurity as far as the banking ecosystem is concerned. Thanks. Uh, there's another question from Mr. Kanda Swami P, who says, even if strengthened on all networks for cyber attack, if any cyber attack leads to production loss, can we get from insurance agency? The answer is yes. You can get your claims back from an insurance agency provided you have a detailed cyber insurance plan in place. Please don't believe whatever these cyber insurance agencies are telling you. Please read the fine print very carefully, because in the fine print, they will tell you what they will be excluding. And in case if you are not going to be careful, they will put in such a large amount of exclusions that ultimately when the time comes for you to go ahead and demand money from the insurance company, they're going to rely upon any one of these exclusions, and consequently you may ultimately land up not getting any money. So please, before you sign up on any cyber insurance policy, read through the terms and conditions, tell your demands very clearly to the insurance company that in the event I will take every precaution available. And when I say every precaution available, every precaution under the prevailing law. I'm not expected to close my business and only do cybersecurity. That's not the law's vision. The law's vision is please do minimum cybersecurity that the law wants you to do, but focus on your work, no problem. And if despite all this, also take cyber insurance policy. And if despite all this you get hacked, then at least the cyber insurance policy will take care of the stuff. So I believe you can get your monies from your cyber insurance covers, provided you have adequately and well negotiated your cyber insurance policy cover with the concerned insurance agent or company. Thanks. There's another question from Mr. Sunil Sobidar, who says, in Europe, there is GDPR since May 2019. Will this also soon be in India, global or per state? Well, in India, we don't have the GDPR yet. The GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation, is a European Union instrument, which is applicable across the European Union. But because it has got extraterritorial applicability, it also applies in India as well. In the context that if an European comes to India and any Indian entity is handling or processing the said European citizens' data, then the said Indian entity will have to comply with such kinds of provisions of the GDPR. But in India, the Indian government is moving in a different direction. It has already put before the Indian Parliament the Data Protection Bill of 2019, which is substantially inspired and based on the General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union. Now that bill has been sent to the Joint Parliamentary Committee by the Indian Parliament and is currently pending the consideration of the said committee. But primarily, I believe that the learnings during COVID-19 has told us that that bill is now no longer sufficient. You will have to incorporate the learnings of COVID-19 and lockdowns into the new data protection bill so as to make it more topical or relevant. But you could at least have a read of the draft data protection bill of 2019 just to understand how the law is trying to deal with various categories of personal information and what kind of mechanisms, processes, and procedures you as distinctive stakeholders, industries, and corporates are required to comply with and to implement in order to protect and preserve not just the sanctity and veracity of such data, but also the cybersecurity of such data. I hope that would answer that question. Thanks. There's a question from Ms. Anita Jaswar, who says there are various apps such as GPay, Paytm, etc., various platforms used for e-transaction incorporate using Beam UPI. Are they secure? And in case any cybersecurity breach happens, how to proceed as per client customer? Well, please read the terms and conditions of any platform before you start using the same. Read its privacy policy to start understanding how the said platform is going to handle, or process your personal data. And mind you, your financial information is your sensitive personal data. The Indian IT Act and the various rules and regulations of 2011 have mandated some strict parameters of compliances for companies who are dealing, handling, or processing sensitive personal data of yours. So when you're relying upon these platforms, please do your due diligence. Well, all these platforms are mandated to exercise due diligence, to have in place appropriate cybersecurity parameters. But we have been seeing that there is massive breaches also happening. So please go with the basic presumption that no platform is 100% secure and that your data could potentially be compromised. And in case if that's going to be compromised, please remember the golden 72-hour principle. The Reserve Bank of India has come up with a new notification of 6th of July 2018. The notification says that if there is an unauthorized transaction into your online bank account, your credit card, your debit card, or any other payment instructions, and the said unauthorized transaction is not due to your negligence, then if you report the matter within first 72 hours of the said incident in writing to the bank and to the law enforcement agencies, then you will not be called upon to pay any of the loss, and the entire money that's been lost would be paid back into your account by the bank or by the credit card company. So please remember that 72-hour principle. If you do that and if you follow that well, we've seen people getting a lot of money back. But if you are late and if you report after 72 hours, then the law says from the 4th day onwards till the 10th day, the company will have to pay about 90% of the money to you, while 10% of the money will have to be, of course, absorbed by you as loss. So try to approach as soon as possible and try to go under the directives of the RBI to get your money back at the earliest. And in case if you ever have any problem, I've shared with you my email ID. You can reach out to me at any point of time. My email ID is very simple. It's Pavan, P-A-V-A-N, at pavanduggal.com, P-A-V-A-N-D-U-G-G-A-L.com. Also, I'm available on Yahoo at pavanduggal@yahoo.com. A lot of people spell Pavan with a W, but I spell Pavan with a V. It's P-A-V-A-N-D-U-G-G-A-L. So I hope that would have answered your query as well. There's a question from Shobha Yadav who says, is our Google Drive safe? If not, how do we protect our Google Drive? Ma'am, your Google Drive is your cloud storage that Google provides you. Read the terms and conditions and privacy policy of Google to understand how secure or safe or private is your data. First and foremost, there's not much privacy on Google. Number two, on cybersecurity, Google takes its cybersecurity relatively very strictly, primarily because it wants to monetize all your data. And its entire advertising monies are dependent on the security of its data. So it's reasonably secure. However, if you really want to be absolutely secure, it's always a good idea to take a backup of the Google Drive on another location, preferably on a different other system or on a different other removable hard disk. There should always be the presumption that at one point of time, my Google Drive may crash. And if it crashes or if it's not available or if I'm not able to access the said information that I have put on my Google Drive, then at least I can use my backups, my disaster recovery backups for the purposes of restoring my data and then going ahead with my daily work. So it's safe, but it's not 100% safe. It's a great idea to have backups, have disaster recovery, so that you can potentially not be hampered or hindered in your digital activities as you actually go forward. Thank you. Well, there's another question which says, what is NCIIP policy? Well, you're of course referring to NCIIPC paradigm per se. Well, in India, the critical information infrastructure has been sought to be appropriately well regulated under the Information Technology Act 2000. By virtue of the amendments to the IT Act, the government was authorized to create one nodal agency for protection and preservation of critical information infrastructure in India. And that's the agency called the NCIIPC, the National Center, the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. Now, if you are therefore dealing, handling, or processing sensitive personal data or specifically critical information infrastructure, then you are expected to comply with the various guidelines, the rules and regulations that the NCIIPC has come up with. Also make sure that you have an appropriate NCIIP policy so that there is appropriate clarity as to what steps, reasonable security practices and procedures and mechanisms you're going to adopt at your level so as to protect and preserve the cyber security of the critical information infrastructure that you are currently dealing with. So please have a look at the various norms pertaining to the NCIIPC on their website. And in case if you think that your specific industry or your operation is covered within those parameters, it's a great idea to have an appropriate policy in this regard, but also ensure that the policy does not remain a mere paper tiger and that you continue to effectively enforce that policy both in letter and in spirit. Well, there's another question that's coming from Mr. Pankaj Bhatt, who says, what kind of advanced tools our cybercrime investigation officers are using? And if a reported instance is not replied to, what to do? Well, that brings us to the broader issue of the capacities and capabilities of the law enforcement agencies in India. Well, by and large, in our country, we've got some very brilliant law enforcement officers individually who have done such remarkable work. But when I look at the law enforcement agencies as a whole, I find there's a big disconnect. There's a need for massive capacity building. Yes, now in different states, you've got now different cyber forensic laboratories with latest tools, and including licenses of programs like NCASE and new forensic applications. But I think what's currently missing is that the relevant people who are there in the law enforcement agencies, all of them will have to be appropriately trained and build appropriate capacities therein to deal with these cyber investigations. Why? Because now more and more things are coming cyber. There will be more cyber crimes, cyber breaches, cyber thefts, cyber incidents. Therefore, every normal police officer, whether he's a cyber or non-cyber wing, will now have to deal with electronic information, electronic evidence. And now during COVID-19, it's only electronic evidence that's constantly being generated. So there's a need for more capacity building. They're doing some good tools. I teach at the National Police Academy in Hyderabad and the National Judicial Academy in Bhopal. And I can tell you, a lot of good work is being done by these academies. But I think far more needs to be done. And in case if these guys are not able to investigate your claim properly, then of course you have the remedy to go to court, get an appropriate order from the court, get appropriate directions under Section 76 of the Information Technology Act 2000, asking them to take appropriate steps to address the specific nuances of the cyber incident or the cyber crime that you've reported. So you've got remedies, but you'll have to take hold of these remedies as you specifically go forward. There's another question from Mr. Atul Patel, who says, what is the responsibility or liability of any organization to protect the personal employee information of employees collected as part of employment process? Well, if you are a company or an industry and you've collected information about your employees, that information will be no normal information. It will contain personal data and sensitive personal information. You will collect information about, of course, their names, their father names, their backgrounds. You'll have parameters for their health. You have parameters for their medical treatments. You'll have elements pertaining to their bank accounts. So credit card, debit card details, or accounts where the salary is going to go. So you would not only be dealing with normal information, personal information, but also sensitive personal data. And that being so, you would also be handling with personally identifiable information. In such a scenario, please realize that if you are negligent, and as a result of your negligence, some loss gets occurred to the concerned employee, they can sue you for unlimited damages by way of compensation under Section 43A of the Information Technology Act 2000. Unlimited damages. For that, they don't have to go to a court of law. A special court under the IT Act, being the court of the adjudicating officer, has been specifically provided in this regard. So my suggestion is, please realize that you will be liable. Therefore, you are already mandated in your capacity as an employer to not just do your documented due diligence as an intermediary under the IT Act, but in addition, you are also mandated to put in place reasonable security practices and procedures so as to protect and preserve the authenticity and veracity of such data. So clearly, you are going to be liable if you are going to be negligent. Therefore, I come back to my original point that you have to focus on compliances. Please comply with the IT Act. rules and regulations. Try to be on the right side of the law. Don't try to focus on your jugaad capabilities. Maybe they may not work. And if they don't work, I can promise you one thing. The Indian IT Act looks a very small piece of legislation, just about 90 sections, but it's one of the most complicated legislations in Indian history. And once you get sucked into the IT Act, it's like getting sucked into a whirlpool. It's going to get easy to get sucked in, but it may take you years to get out. So it's always a great idea never to be stuck in any kind of proceedings under the IT Act and under the Indian cyber law. Thanks. I hope that will suffice. There's another question from Mr. Avadut Sumant, who says, do you suggest that professional bodies like Bar Council, ICAI, ICSI, police officers are required to make the formal learning of cyber law to its professionals through statutory mandates? If yes, how to process the same? I have been of the firm opinion that cyber law now has to be your lifelong companion. Cyber security is your lifelong friend. So you will have to start incorporating cyber education, cyber law education, and cyber security education from the school, from the first standard onwards, because you've begun to start giving devices to children at the ages of 2, 3, or 4 years. Further, specifically in the context of professionals, you need to specifically mandate that every professional in whatever sector today must have basic working knowledge of cyber law. And that's the reason why I had founded this particular online university called Cyber Law University, because I believe that education has to be your lifelong companion, which means that you may be in any sector, you may be any, but because you're dealing with electronic format, because you're dealing with use of computers, computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, or communication devices, you have to have basic working knowledge of not just cyber law, but also the various trends in cyber law that are emerging. And for that, I think I already have made suggestions to various statutory authorities that they must mandate these courses at the Cyber Law University, online university at cyberlawuniversity.com. We offer various courses, including courses specifically for professionals. So I have got a course called Cyber Law for focal areas on professionals. There's also a specific course called Dr. Pavan Duggal's Mantras on cyber law for professionals. So I think mandating will have to be the urgent, immediate necessity. And these will have to be constantly, self-help, updating of your skill set kind of courses. Because the curriculum process is a very slow process. Trying to get everything incorporated in the curriculums of schools and colleges may take years because of the bureaucratic setup. Hence, these value addition courses will have to be added. And I completely endorse your thought processes that all these professional bodies must try as far as possible to mandate the cyber law education as an integral component of the continuing legal education processes for all their professionals, in case if we want our professionals to be more well-equipped to deal with these scenarios. Well, I hope that answers. There's a question. Please suggest authenticated website providing updates with respect to cybersecurity. Well, there is one particular website of Computer Emergency Response Team of India, which is the official website. Please go to that website and you'll constantly find updates about the latest cybersecurity breaches, advisories, and vulnerabilities. Also, I would encourage you to go and visit the website mit.gov.in, which is the official website of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. For updates on cybersecurity legalities and on cyber law, please go and visit the website cyberlaws.net, which gives you a substantive idea of various cyber legal parameters. There's a cyber law repository there. We can have a look at that. You can also visit the website of the International Commission security.com, where you would find distinctive cyber legal, cybersecurity laws and legislations passed in different parts of the world and the appropriate parameters in that regard. You could also get some of this information on our website, pavanduggal.com. So I believe you just have to constantly keep on updating your skill sets and going forward. I think this has been a very fascinating session. There's been so many of these very rich, diverse questions, but I'm looking at the watch and I think it's time that we will have to say goodbye. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for taking time out this afternoon and being with us at this webinar. I enjoyed talking to you, and in case if I can be of any help to any one of you, please feel free to reach out to me. And in case the Federation of Gujarat Industries wants any assistance from you, from myself, I will be happy to provide it. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and looking forward to our call. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duggal. Mr. Manohar Chapman, President, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, I have the proud privilege to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of Federation of Gujarat Industries to our esteemed guest speaker for excellently addressing on cybersecurity for industries during COVID-19. I'm sure that based on his enriched knowledge, experience, and expertise shared with us on the subject and guidance provided to us, participants will immensely stand on to benefit from thereon. I would like to thank all the participants to be present here in this seminar and making it this a grand success. May I now request, before we end, to rise up for the national anthem, please.
जनगणमन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Pavan ji, thank you very much. Mr. Pavan, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Everyone.
આપણે બતાવ્યું ને આપણે પેલામાં તો આપણે બીજી વારમાં આપણે બતાવ્યું અભિદેવ એક્સપ્લેન કર્યું